Four men in tailored suits moved like predators through the marble lobby of the Belmont Grand Hotel. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Guests sipped champagne in velvet chairs. Business deals whispered in corners lined with gold. But no one noticed the danger until gunfire shattered the peace. CEO Ariana Steele stood frozen in the executive lounge, surrounded by men with cartel tattoos and cold eyes. Death had found her. It should have ended there. Blood on imported marble. Another headline. Another victory for the cartels. But from behind the service corridor, a quiet man in a janitor's uniform stepped forward. His name was Caleb Turner. And what happened in the next 6 seconds left witnesses speechless and the cartels scrambling. Follow this story to the very end. And tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, so I know how far this story has traveled. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Belmont Grand Hotel gleamed like a fortress of wealth on the corner of 5th and Madison. 37 stories of limestone and glass, where power brokers closed billion-dollar deals over aged scotch and handshake promises. The executive lounge on the 14th floor catered exclusively to those whose names appeared in Forbes and Wall Street Journal headlines. Ariana Steele belonged to that world. At 39, she had built Vertex Technologies from a startup in her garage to a global empire worth $8 billion. Tonight, she sat in a leather wingback chair, tablet glowing, finalizing the acquisition that would reshape the tech industry. She never saw them coming. Four men entered through the service entrance, bypassing security with IDs that looked legitimate until examined too closely. They wore tailored suits that concealed body armor and weapons. Their movements carried the discipline of soldiers, but their eyes held something darker. These were not corporate rivals. These were sicarios, cartel enforcers whose resumes were written in blood across 3 countries. The first shot shattered a crystal decanter. Guests screamed. A waiter dropped his tray, silver crashing against imported Italian tile. Ariana's head of security, a former Secret Service agent named Preston Ford, reached for his weapon but never cleared leather. A bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him backward into a marble column. He crumpled, conscious but useless, blood pooling beneath him. The leader of the hit squad moved with terrible calm. His name was Vicente Rojas, a man whose face appeared on Interpol watch lists and cartel organizational charts. He crossed the lounge floor as guests scrambled behind overturned furniture, their expensive clothes suddenly meaningless against the reality of violence. Vicente's hand closed around Ariana's wrist, yanking her from the chair with brutal efficiency. Her tablet clattered to the floor, screen spiderwebbing across her company's quarterly projections. She tried to fight. Her self-defense instructor had promised she could handle herself, but theory collapsed against men who killed for a living. A second enforcer grabbed her other arm. A third blocked the exit. The fourth swept the room with his weapon, ensuring no heroes emerged from the terrified witnesses. Ariana's executive assistant, Leila Curtis, had been reviewing contracts at a nearby table. She was 28, brilliant, the kind of woman who could dismantle corporate structures with spreadsheets and negotiation. But this was not a boardroom. Her chair toppled as she lunged toward her boss, instinct overriding training. A hand shoved her backward. She hit the floor hard, her palm scraping against tile, but her eyes never left Ariana being dragged toward the service corridor. Down that corridor, past the guest elevators, and through the employee-only doors. Caleb Turner had been emptying trash bins. He was invisible to the hotel's wealthy patrons, just another janitor in a gray uniform pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. He preferred it that way. Invisibility meant safety. Invisibility meant his daughter stayed protected from the life he used to live. He did not hear the first scream. The service corridors were insulated, designed to keep the machinery of hospitality hidden from those who paid premium rates. What reached him was motion at the edge of his peripheral vision, an angle of movement his body recognized before his conscious mind processed it. 4 men, 1 woman, 4 supplied with intent to control and extract. His hand stilled on the trash bag he had been tying. Caleb's mind split into two tracks. One, still the father, who made pancakes every Sunday and helped his daughter with science projects. The other, the operator whose reflexes lived deeper than thought, carved into nerve and muscle through years of training that never fully left. The first enforcer never registered the threat. Caleb moved with economy of motion. No wasted energy. No telegraphed intent. His hand struck the man's throat with surgical precision, collapsing the windpipe just enough to silence and incapacitate without killing. The enforcer dropped his weapon, hands clutching his neck, eyes wide with shock and oxygen deprivation. Caleb caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him silently. The second man spun, weapon rising. Caleb was already inside his defensive arc. A palm strike to the solar plexus folded the enforcer forward. An elbow to the temple sent him into unconsciousness. 2 seconds, 2 down. Vicente released Ariana, his weapon tracking toward the new threat. But Caleb had trained against men like this, had operated in places where hesitation measured the difference between mission success and body bags. He swept low, hooking Vicente's ankle, disrupting balance. As Vicente fell, Caleb's hand locked around the weapon arm, twisting with controlled violence. The gun clattered away. Vicente's head met the floor with a sound like a melon splitting. The fourth enforcer had been guarding the rear. He raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. Caleb rolled, using Vicente's body as cover, came up inside the shooter's range. A strike to the wrist. The gun discharged into the ceiling, plaster raining down. Another strike, this one to the jaw. The enforcer crumpled. 6 seconds, 4 bodies. Silence crashed back like a physical force. Ariana stood frozen. Her breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood from Preston's wound had sprayed across her white blouse. Her perfectly styled hair hung in disarray, but her eyes, sharp and analytical, even in shock, focused on the janitor who had just dismantled a professional hit squad with terrifying efficiency. Caleb straightened slowly, his uniform still tucked, his breathing controlled. His face showed nothing. No triumph, no fear, just the blank neutrality of a man who had done this before and knew the cost of attention. He raised his hands slightly as hotel security and police sirens converged on the building, signaling compliance even as his eyes tracked every exit, every potential threat, habits that would never die. Preston Ford, clutching his wounded shoulder, stared from his position against the column. He had trained with the best. He recognized what he had just witnessed. This was not luck. This was not amateur heroics. This was surgical violence applied by someone with elite training. Lila Curtis pulled herself up, tablet clutched to her chest like armor. She looked at Caleb Turner, really looked at him for the first time. The quiet janitor who nodded politely when passing in corridors, who never made eye contact, who seemed to disappear even when standing in plain sight. Who was he? Caleb's jaw tightened. He saw the phones already recording, the witnesses whose fear would transform into curiosity, the story taking shape beyond his control, and all he could think was a single name. Sophie, his daughter. What would this mean for her? By the time police separated witnesses from suspects, by the time paramedics loaded Preston into an ambulance, by the time Ariana Steele gave her first shaking statement, the footage had already begun its escape into the world. Shaky video captured from behind overturned furniture showed only Caleb's back, the blur of motion, the brutal efficiency of his response. But it was enough. The invisible man had been seen. And once seen, invisibility could never be reclaimed. The footage went viral with the kind of velocity that transforms ordinary moments into cultural phenomena. 7 million views by dawn. 40 million within 72 hours. The algorithm loved it. Mystery plus violence plus heroism equaled engagement. News outlets picked it up. Reporters manufactured nicknames. The Ghost Guardian. The Janitor Warrior. Social media threads exploded with speculation. Was he ex-military? Private? Security? a hired bodyguard in deep cover. In his cramped apartment in Brooklyn, Caleb shut the blinds tighter. The building was old, radiators clanking through winter nights, neighbors who knew each other's business but respected boundaries. He had chosen it deliberately. Anonymous, affordable, safe. He washed dishes by hand as if scrubbing away exposure. Each plate a meditation, each glass a prayer that the world would forget. But his daughter found it first. Sophie Turner was 10 years old, small for her age but fierce in the way of young people who have learned early that the world does not always grant safety. She had her mother's dark hair and stubborn chin, her father's quiet intensity that surfaced when she concentrated on homework or argued about bedtime. That afternoon, she burst through the apartment door, backpack bouncing, her best friend Amber Maxwell's tablet clutched in both hands. "Daddy," she said, her voice trembling between awe and confusion. "Is this you?" Caleb turned from the kitchen sink, water still running, soap suds clinging to his forearms. Sophie stood in the narrow hallway, the tablet screen glowing with frozen violence. He saw himself captured mid-strike, face blurred but body language unmistakable. The view counter spun upward even as he watched. He dried his hands slowly, buying seconds to construct a response. Then he knelt, brushing hair from her face, seeing Emma in that gesture. His late wife, gone 3 years now, but present in every expression their daughter made. "Yes," he admitted softly. "That is me. But it is nothing special. Just helping someone who needed help. Like when we carry groceries for Mrs. Vaughn upstairs." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophie did not care for modesty. She flung her arms around his neck, whispering fiercely against his chest. "I knew you were special. I knew it." Something inside Caleb fractured, a soundless crack like ice, thawing after a long freeze. He held her tight, his calloused hands trembling slightly. He had built a life of carefully maintained ordinariness. Work, school, dinner, homework, bedtime stories, repeat. The rhythm had become armor. Now that armor had shattered, and he did not know what came next. The calls began that evening. Unknown numbers lighting up the cheap phone he bought specifically because it could not be easily traced. He ignored them all. Then messages. Reporters offering interviews, documentary producers pitching limited series, even a literary agent suggesting a book deal. He deleted each one without reading past the first sentence. But he could not delete the world. 2 days after the hotel attack, Lila Curtis found him. Not through private investigators or corporate resources, though Vertex Technologies certainly had access to both. She found him because she paid attention, because while detectives interviewed witnesses and security reviewed footage, she had noticed the name tag on his uniform in one of the clearer video frames, Turner. And the hotel kept employee records. She came to the small playground, 3 blocks from his apartment. It was late afternoon, autumn sun painting everything gold. The playground equipment was old, swings with chains that squeaked, a slide with rust spots, a basketball hoop tilted at a slight angle. Neighborhood young people played without supervision, their laughter mixing with traffic noise and distant music. Caleb pushed Sophie on the swing, her feet pumping as she sang about clouds and adventures. He saw Lila approaching, though he never turned his head. Years of training forbade surprise. His body tracked her movement through peripheral awareness, cataloging threat assessment even as his hands maintained the gentle rhythm of pushing his daughter higher. "Mr. Turner," Lila said when she reached conversational distance. Her voice carried polish, the kind that came from expensive education and corporate ladder climbing. But underneath was something else. Genuine gratitude maybe, or curiosity, or both. Caleb's eyes flicked toward her, taking inventory in a single glance. Designer coat that cost more than his monthly rent. Shoes meant for boardrooms, not playgrounds. The careful posture of someone uncomfortable on grass and wood chips, afraid of leaving marks or appearing out of place. "No thanks necessary," he replied. His voice was quiet, neutral, but a trace of Brooklyn accent emerged around the edges, roots he rarely acknowledged. Sophie twisted mid-swing to examine the stranger. With the unfiltered assessment possessed only by the young, she declared, "I am Sophie, and this is my daddy. He is really strong." Lila smiled, something unpracticed and genuine softening her professional mask. "I am Lila. I work for the woman your daddy helped. She is very grateful. Is she okay?" Sophie asked, suddenly serious. Daddy said, "Bad men try to hurt her. She is okay, because of your daddy," Lila said, holding the girl's gaze with respect. Caleb felt the world shift slightly. The invisible man had been seen, not just in viral footage, but here, now, by someone who worked in the world he had deliberately left behind. Someone who represented everything he had walked away from. Power, money, the kind of attention that got people killed. "I should get Sophie home," he said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. But Lila did not move. "Of course. I just wanted to say thank you. Properly. Not through lawyers or press releases." She paused, then added quietly, "What you did was extraordinary. It was necessary," Caleb said. "Nothing more." He lifted Sophie from the swing. She protested, wanting 5 more minutes. The eternal negotiation of young people and bedtime routines. He distracted her with promises of mac and cheese for dinner, her favorite, and she skipped ahead toward the apartment building. Lila watched them go, father and daughter, disappearing into the flow of Brooklyn evening. She stood alone in the playground as other families packed up, as streetlights flickered on, as the city adjusted itself for night. And she realized something that would change everything. She had spent years making herself indispensable to Ariana Steele, anticipating needs, solving problems before they became crises, building a career on competence and invisibility of her own kind. But watching Caleb Turner walk away, she recognized something she had not felt in years. Not just gratitude, not just professional interest, something deeper, something dangerous. Back at his apartment, Caleb locked the door with 3 separate bolts. He checked the windows. He noted the sight lines from neighboring buildings. Old habits, unbreakable habits. Sophie chattered about her day while he cooked pasta, her voice a lifeline to normalcy. But when she finally fell asleep, curled in blankets with her stuffed rabbit, he sat in the dark living room and let himself acknowledge the truth. The life he had built, the careful invisibility, the safe routine, all of it was unraveling. The footage was out there. People were looking, and somewhere, in boardrooms or cartel compounds, someone was making calculations about what his presence meant. He thought about Emma, about the promise he made at her grave. Keep Sophie safe, no matter what. Even if it means disappearing. Even if it means never being who you used to be. The city hummed outside his window, millions of lives intersecting and separating, each one a story the world would never fully know. He had tried to become one of those invisible stories. But the world, it seemed, was not finished with him yet. And in a penthouse office across the city, Ariana Steele sat alone with a glass of wine and watched the footage for the 100th time, watching the janitor move, watching him save her life, watching him try to disappear. She had built an empire by understanding people, by seeing patterns others missed, by recognizing value before the market did. And she saw something in Caleb Turner that terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. He was a man who could have demanded anything, and he demanded nothing. That, she knew, made him either the most dangerous man she had ever met or the most valuable. She intended to find out which. Caleb Turner's story had not begun in that hotel corridor. It had been forged across years and continents, carved into muscle and memory through training that broke most candidates before they earned the right to continue. Once, he wore the insignia of Delta Force, the Army's most elite operational unit. Once, his life was measured in deployments to places that did not appear on maps, missions classified so deeply that even success remained anonymous. He had been recruited young, pulled from the Rangers after a hostage rescue in Yemen went sideways, and he alone kept the operation from becoming a massacre. The Delta assessment tested everything: physical endurance, mental resilience, the capacity to make lethal decisions in fractions of seconds. Most candidates washed out. Caleb thrived. For 8 years, he operated in shadows, counterterrorism, high-value target elimination, hostage rescue. His team moved through Mogadishu, Kabul, Baghdad, Caracas. They were ghosts, with government authorization, soldiers whose faces never appeared in newspapers, whose sacrifices earned no public medals. Caleb excelled because he understood something fundamental. Violence was not personal. It was geometry, angles, and timing. Applied force, at precise moments, to achieve specific outcomes. He met Emma during a rare stateside rotation. She was a trauma nurse at Walter Reed. The kind of person who walked into chaos and created order through sheer competence and compassion. She had seen what war did to bodies and minds. She understood the cost without needing explanation. They married after 6 months, a small ceremony with his team as witnesses. Her family confused but supportive. For 2 years, they made it work. His deployments, her shifts, stolen weeks between missions, where they pretended normal life was possible. Then Sophie arrived, small, and fierce, and perfect. Caleb held his daughter in the hospital, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger, and felt something shift inside him. A calculation he had never made before, what he was willing to risk, what he could no longer afford to lose. Emma understood. She always understood. You cannot do this forever, she told him one night while Sophie slept between them. Eventually, the odds catch up. Eventually, you do not come home. He had planned to finish his enlistment. 2 more years. Train the next generation. Transition to civilian contracting maybe. Something with better hours and less likelihood of body bags. But the universe, as it often does, had different plans. The accident happened on a Tuesday. Emma had been driving home from a double shift, exhaustion making her reflexes a fraction slower than necessary. The semi-truck driver had been awake for 19 hours, his logbook falsified, his company pressuring impossible delivery schedules. Physics took over. Metal crumpled. Glass shattered. Emma died before the ambulance arrived, her last words to a passerby asking them to tell Caleb she loved him and to take care of their baby. Caleb was in Colombia when he got the call. A raid on a cartel compound. High value. Targets confirmed. He was pulled from the operation mid-mission. Flown home on a C-130. Arrived too late for goodbyes. Sophie was 14 months old. She would never remember her mother's face except through photographs. She would never hear her mother's laugh except in videos that Caleb watched late at night when grief made sleep impossible. The army offered condolences. His unit sent flowers. Command suggested counseling. But none of it addressed the fundamental problem. He was a single father with a daughter who needed him alive more than the country needed another operator. The choice was not difficult. It was simply brutal. He resigned. Not quietly, not with the retirement ceremony that long-serving operators typically received. He walked away mid-contract, accepting the penalties, burning bridges he had spent years building. His team understood. Warriors knew the weight of family. But understanding did not make it easier. Transition was harder than any mission. One day he was Caleb Turner, Delta Force operator, trusted to breach compounds and end wars before they began. The next he was Caleb Turner, unemployed single father, holding a toddler who did not understand why mommy never came home. He had carried rifles through war zones. Now he carried diapers and bottles. He had been trained to break men. Emma's absence broke him in ways no battlefield ever had. The benefits helped. Military death benefits. Emma's life insurance. Enough to survive but not thrive. He moved to Brooklyn because the rent was almost affordable, and the neighborhood had the kind of anonymity cities provide. He found work where he could. Construction. Security. Eventually, the Belmont Grand Hotel hired him as part of their janitorial staff. Night shifts mostly. It meant Sophie could stay with Mrs. Vaughn, the retired schoolteacher downstairs, who loved having a young person around and charged almost nothing for childcare. The work was invisible, perfect. He emptied trash. He mopped floors. He polished brass fixtures in lobbies where people closed deals worth more than he would earn in a lifetime. And he was content. Because invisibility meant safety. Invisibility meant Sophie could grow up without the shadows of his past finding her. He taught himself to be a father the way he had taught himself to be a soldier. Through repetition and discipline, breakfast routines, school drop-offs, homework, at the kitchen table, bedtime stories, where he did all the voices badly, and Sophie giggled at his attempts. He learned to braid her hair through YouTube tutorials. He learned to navigate parent-teacher conferences and playground politics. He learned that being present mattered more than being perfect. Sophie thrived. She was smart, stubborn, kind. She made friends easily. She loved science and hated math homework. She asked questions constantly, her mind always working, always curious. Why is the sky blue? Where do dreams come from? Will you always be here, Daddy? That last question haunted him, because he knew the truth. His past was not dead, it was dormant, and the skills that had kept him alive in Kandahar and Bogota never fully left. His body remembered, the way his shoulders squared automatically when entering rooms, the way his eyes scanned for exits and threats, the way his hands moved when Sophie stumbled, and he caught her before conscious thought registered danger. He tried to bury the operator. But the operator lived too deep, woven into reflexes and instincts that could not be unlearned. And now, because of 6 seconds in a hotel corridor, the world had seen him. The invisible man had been exposed. And he knew, with the certainty of experience, that exposure brought consequences. Somewhere out there, Vicente Rojas had connections. The cartel did not forgive interference. They did not accept losses without retaliation. And Caleb had not just interfered, he had humiliated them, made them look weak. That kind of insult demanded response. He lay awake that night, listening to Sophie breathe in the next room, and made calculations. How long before they found him? Days? Weeks? How could he protect her if they came? Could he run? Could he disappear again, this time completely? But even as he planned, he knew the truth. Running meant admitting defeat. Running meant teaching Sophie that fear dictated life. And he had not survived 8 years of combat, had not clawed his way through grief and single parenthood, to let fear win now. The world had seen him. Fine, let them look, but they would see a father first, a janitor second, and the operator only if they forced his hand. Because Caleb Turner had made a promise at Emma's grave, keep Sophie safe, no matter what, even if it means going back to being the man he had tried so hard to leave behind. The city hummed outside his window, millions of lives, millions of stories, and his, whether he wanted it or not, had just become visible again. The letter arrived by courier on a Thursday morning. Caleb opened the door to find a young man in a pressed uniform holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with embossed letterhead. Vertex Technologies. The man shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable delivering correspondence to a janitor's apartment in a building where paint peeled from hallway walls and the elevator worked only when it felt cooperative. Mr. Turner, the courier said, extending the envelope like an offering. From Miss Steele. Caleb accepted it without comment. He closed the door and stood in the narrow hallway, Sophie's breakfast dishes still cluttering the small kitchen table. The envelope was heavy, expensive paper that whispered of boardrooms and power. He opened it carefully. The letter was brief but precisely worded. An invitation. A request. A summons dressed in courtesy. Miss Steele wished to meet with him. Friday at 10. Vertex Technologies headquarters. A matter of gratitude and opportunity. It concluded with Ariana Steele's signature. Elegant script that suggested both authority and personal attention. Caleb read it twice, then he set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it as if the paper might reveal hidden intentions. He knew what this was: money. A job offer. The corporate machinery attempting to absorb him, to transform his intervention into something transactional. He wanted no part of it, but refusing outright would only invite more attention. Better to meet, decline politely, make clear his boundaries, then disappear back into the rhythm of mops and trash bins and blessed anonymity. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth. Caleb dressed in his only suit, the same one he had worn to Emma's funeral and never touched since. It hung slightly loose now, 3 years of lean meals and physical labor changing his body in subtle ways. He checked himself in the bathroom mirror and saw a stranger. The suit tried to make him look respectable. His eyes, alert and measuring, suggested something else entirely. Vertex Technologies occupied 42 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. The lobby was all marble and abstract art, the kind of space designed to intimidate anyone who did not belong. Security stopped him immediately. A guard with a shaved head and the posture of former military studied him with professional suspicion. Purpose of visit, the guard said. Meeting with Miss Steele. The guard checked his computer, eyebrows rising slightly when the appointment confirmed. He handed Caleb a visitor badge and gestured toward the executive elevators. 42nd floor. Someone will meet you. The elevator was glass-walled, offering views of Manhattan as it ascended. Caleb kept his back to the windows, watching the floor numbers climb, noting the security cameras in each corner. Old habits. Unbreakable habits. Lila Curtis waited when the doors opened. She wore charcoal gray, professional armor that somehow made her look both powerful and approachable. Her smile was genuine, but carried an edge of nervousness. "Mr. Turner," she said, "thank you for coming. Miss Steele is waiting." She led him through corridors, lined with awards and patents, past conference rooms, where executives gestured at presentations, into a corner office that commanded views of the entire city. Ariana Steele stood at the window, silhouetted against morning light. She turned as they entered. Caleb had seen her photograph in business magazines, had glimpsed her that night at the hotel before violence erupted. But seeing her here, in her domain, was different. She moved with the confidence of someone who had built empires from ideas and refused to apologize for her success. Her suit was midnight blue, her dark hair pulled back in a style that suggested efficiency without sacrificing elegance. But her eyes, sharp and analytical, carried shadows he recognized. Fear not, fully processed. Trauma wearing a professional mask. "Mr. Turner," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Her handshake was firm, no nonsense. Caleb noticed the faint tremor she tried to hide, the way her fingers tightened just slightly, as if grounding herself in physical contact. "Miss Steele," he replied. "Please, sit." She gestured toward leather chairs arranged near a coffee table that probably cost more than his annual rent. Saturday Lila took a position near the door, tablet in hand, the eternal assistant ready to facilitate or intervene as needed. Ariana did not waste time on pleasantries. "I owe you my life." The cartel wanted to make a statement. "Execute me publicly, terrorize the business community. You prevented that." "I was there," Caleb said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "We both know that is not true. Security footage has been analyzed by experts. What you did required training most people will never receive. You moved like someone with significant operational experience." Caleb said nothing. Silence was its own answer. Ariana leaned forward. "I want to offer you a position, head of personal security, base salary, $400,000, benefits, housing stipend, your daughter's education fully funded through graduate school. You would have resources, authority, a team under your command." The offer hung in the air, glittering like bait. Leela watched from her position, curious how he would respond. Most people, when offered financial security beyond their dreams, did not hesitate. Caleb did. "I appreciate the offer," he said, his voice measured. "But I am not interested." Ariana blinked. "Not interested? No. May I ask why?" "You are working as a janitor. You are clearly overqualified. This would provide stability for your daughter, opportunities most people spend their lives chasing." Caleb met her gaze steadily. "My daughter wants her father home at night. She wants someone who helps with homework and makes dinner and does not carry a weapon to work. I gave her mother a promise. Keep Sophie safe. That means stability, not danger. It means being present, not deployed. Your world is not safe, Miss Steele. The cartel proved that, and I will not bring that into my daughter's life. The bluntness landed like a physical blow. Ariana sat back, her expression shifting from surprise to something resembling respect. You are refusing $400,000 because you prioritize your daughter's emotional well-being over financial security. I am refusing because money cannot buy back time I lose to violence. Money cannot promise I come home every night. My daughter has already lost one parent. I will not make her an orphan chasing someone else's safety. Lila felt something catch in her chest. She had spent years in corporate environments where every decision calculated return on investment, where people traded time and relationships for advancement and compensation. Watching Caleb Turner refuse wealth for principle was like witnessing a language she had forgotten existed. Ariana stood, walking to the window. The city sprawled below, millions of lives intersecting, each one a story she would never fully know. When she spoke again, her voice carried less corporate polish and more raw honesty. They will come for me again. You know that. Vicente Rojas has connections that span 3 countries. The cartel does not forgive interference. I survived because you were there. Next time, I might not be so fortunate. Caleb rose. Then hire better security. But do not hire me. I am not available for purchase, Miss Steele. Not at any price. He moved toward the door. Lila stepped aside, her eyes tracking him with something between admiration and confusion. Ariana turned from the window. Wait, she said. He paused, hand on the door. What if I am not offering you money? What if I am asking for help? Person to person. No contracts, no obligations. Just someone who understands that threats do not disappear because we wish them away. Caleb looked back. Her mask had cracked slightly. Beneath the CEO was a woman who had faced death and knew it was not finished with her. I hope you find the help you need, he said quietly. But it will not be me. He left. The elevator descended silently. The lobby expelled him back into the city where he belonged. He walked 3 blocks before stopping at a small playground, sitting on a bench, letting his hands shake now that no one was watching. He had meant every word. But refusing had cost something. Because he knew Ariana Steele was right. The cartel would return. And when they did, more people would die. Maybe even people he cared about. Maybe even Lila, whose eyes had looked at him with something he had not seen in years. Something that made him remember he was still human beneath the operator's training. That evening, Sophie asked about his day over mac and cheese. He told her he had gone to a meeting. She asked if it was important. He said no, just someone wanting something he could not give. She studied him with her mother's intuition. You look sad, Daddy. He smiled, brushing hair from her face. I am not sad, Bug. I am right here with you. That is all that matters. But later, after she slept, he sat in the dark and wondered if refusing had been courage or cowardice. If protecting Sophie meant avoiding danger or confronting it before it found them. The city offered no answers. It just hummed outside his window. Indifferent and eternal, while Caleb Turner tried to convince himself that invisibility was still possible. The second attempt came 3 weeks later. Not at a hotel this time. The cartel had learned. They studied patterns. They waited for vulnerability. Ariana Steele had a standing appointment every Tuesday at noon, lunch with her board chair at Meridian, an upscale restaurant in the financial district known for discretion and $700 wine lists. Her security had been upgraded after the hotel attack. 2 former Secret Service agents. Armored vehicle. Varied routes. But predictability creates opportunity, and the cartel was patient. The bomb was sophisticated. Remote detonated. Planted in the parking structure beneath the restaurant during a shift change when cameras were briefly offline and guards distracted by a manufactured emergency 2 floors above. It was designed to trigger when weight sensors confirmed a vehicle matching Ariana's specifications had parked in her reserved space. The explosion never happened. A maintenance worker doing routine rounds noticed the device, not because he was trained in explosives, because it had been placed hastily, wires visible where they should have been concealed. He called it in. Bomb squad responded. The device was rendered safe. The restaurant evacuated. Ariana, already en route, was diverted by her security team. She sat in the back of her armored SUV 3 blocks from where she should have died, hands shaking, phone pressed to her ear. Lila Curtis was on the other end, already coordinating, already problem-solving, already transforming chaos into manageable tasks. Pull every security file from the parking structure, Ariana said, her voice tight. I want names of everyone who had access. I want maintenance logs. I want to know how they got past our systems. Already in progress, Lila replied. Federal agents are en route. They will want statements. Ariana closed her eyes. They are not finished. This was cartel work, professional. They knew my schedule, my patterns. Someone is feeding them information. We will find who, Lila promised. But right now, you need to go somewhere safe. Where is safe? Ariana asked, and the question held more than logistics. It held exhaustion, the weight of being hunted, the realization that wealth could not buy immunity from violence. That evening, the story broke. News anchors used words like terrorism and organized crime. Stock analysts speculated about instability at Vertex Technologies. Shareholders demanded answers. The board called emergency meetings. And in a Brooklyn apartment, Caleb Turner watched the coverage with growing unease. Sophie sat beside him on the couch, homework spread across the coffee table, oblivious to the significance of the news report playing in the background. But Caleb understood. The cartel had escalated. They were not interested in quick strikes anymore. This was a campaign, methodical, patient, and it would not stop until Ariana Steele was dead or they were eliminated. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Then again. Finally, he answered. Mr. Turner. Lila Curtis said without preamble. We need to talk. I have nothing to say. Please, just listen. They tried to kill her again today. A bomb. It failed, but next time we might not be fortunate. She needs help. Real help. Not corporate security playing soldier. Someone who understands how these people think. Caleb glanced at Sophie, who was chewing her pencil and frowning at a math problem. I made my position clear. I am not available. What if they come for your daughter? The question landed like a punch. Caleb's entire body went rigid. What did you say? Lila's voice softened but held steel beneath. The cartel does not play by rules. If they identify you as an obstacle, they will target leverage. Your daughter is leverage. I am not threatening you, Mr. Turner. I am warning you. You stepped into their world when you stopped that attack. Whether you accept it or not, you are involved now. Silence stretched. Sophie looked up from her homework. Daddy, are you okay? He forced a smile. Fine. Bug. Just work stuff. He walked into the kitchen, lowering his voice. What do you want from me? Help us identify the leak. Someone inside Vertex is feeding the cartel information. Someone with access to schedules, security protocols, patterns. You were Delta Force. You understand operational security. Help us find them before another attempt succeeds. And if I refuse, then we are all at risk, including your daughter. Because if the cartel decides you are a problem, they will not confront you directly. They will destroy what you love first. That is how they operate. Caleb's jaw clenched. He wanted to argue, wanted to believe invisibility was still an option, but he had operated in their world, had seen cartel tactics in Colombia and Mexico. Lila was right. Once you entered their crosshairs, they did not let you leave. One conversation, he said, finally. I will review your security, identify vulnerabilities, Then I am done. Thank you, Lila breathed. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Vertex headquarters. He ended the call and stood in his small kitchen, hands braced against the counter, breathing controlled but heart racing. Sophie appeared in the doorway, sensing his tension with the intuition only loved ones possess. Is everything okay? She asked quietly. He turned, kneeling to her level. Everything is fine. I just need to help someone with a problem. Like when you help your friends with homework. Will you be safe? Always, he promised, pulling her into a hug. I will always come home to you, Bug. Always. But even as he spoke the words, he wondered if they were true, because agreeing to help meant stepping back into the world he had left, meant using skills he had tried to bury, meant becoming, even temporarily, the operator again. That night, after Sophie slept, Caleb sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. He wrote down everything he remembered about cartel operations, their recruitment methods, their communication protocols, how they identified targets and planned attacks. He had fought them before, had studied their tactics, had learned to think like them in order to defeat them. The bomb was sophisticated. That meant resources, access to military-grade explosives, someone with training. The cartel outsourced when necessary, hired specialists for complex operations. But the intelligence, the scheduling information, that came from inside, someone at Vertex was compromised. He made lists, questions to ask, systems to review, red flags to identify. His handwriting grew tighter as the analysis deepened. This was not just threat assessment. This was war planning. And wars, he knew, required commitment. By morning, he had filled 6 pages. He showered, made Sophie breakfast, walked her to school with the same routine they had followed for 3 years. But something had shifted. His eyes scanned differently. His body moved with heightened awareness. The operator was waking up. At Vertex headquarters, Lila met him with relief etched into her professional mask. Thank you for coming. I have conditions, Caleb said before she could continue. No publicity. No contracts. I review your systems, identify problems. Then I leave. My daughter stays protected. If I find evidence she is at risk, I disappear with her, and you never contact me again. Understood, Lila agreed immediately. She led him to a secure conference room where Ariana Steele waited with her security chief and head of IT. Files covered the table. Personnel records, security logs, digital access data. The machinery of corporate protection laid bare. Caleb spent 4 hours reviewing everything. He asked questions that made security professionals uncomfortable. Who has access to scheduling systems? Who approved contractor credentials? Who knew about the Tuesday lunch pattern? The answers formed a picture. Not clear yet, but emerging. By afternoon, he had narrowed possibilities to 12 employees, people with the right access, the right clearances, the right opportunities to leak information without raising immediate flags. This is your exposure, he said, sliding a list across the table. One of these people is compromised, either willingly or through coercion. You need to investigate quietly. No alerts, no confrontations. Just watch them. Ariana studied the names. Some were long-term employees. Trusted. How do we determine which one? Caleb leaned back. You do not. You feed each one different information. Unique details only they would know. Then you watch which information the cartel acts on. The leak identifies itself. It was a classic counterintelligence technique. Elegant, effective, and it required patience the cartel might not allow. How long will this take? Ariana asked. Days, maybe a week. Depends how active they are. We might not have a week, Lila said quietly. Caleb met her eyes. Then we work faster. But as he prepared to leave, Preston Ford, the security chief who had been wounded in the original hotel attack, stopped him in the hallway. His shoulder was still bandaged, arm in a sling. You know they will come again, Preston said. Probably soon. This canary trap might work, but cartels do not wait for investigations. They strike when opportunity presents. Caleb nodded. I know. Will you be here when they do? The question hung between them. Caleb thought of Sophie. of promises made at Emma's grave, of the life he had built through discipline and deliberate invisibility. But he also thought of Lila, of Ariana, of innocent people who would die if he walked away. "I will be here," he said finally, "until it ends." Preston extended his good hand. "Then I am glad you are on our side." They shook, two warriors recognizing each other across the distance of different wars. And Caleb understood, with absolute clarity, that refusing was no longer possible. The cartel had made this personal, and when it was personal, there was only one way forward, through. The war room was established in a secure basement level of Vertex Technologies that most employees did not know existed. Soundproofed walls, encrypted communications, surveillance feeds from every camera in the building displayed across monitors that covered one entire wall. This was where corporate security managed threats, where crises were contained before they reached boardroom awareness. Now it belonged to Caleb Turner. He stood before the monitors, hands clasped behind his back, studying patterns, employee movement, delivery schedules, shift changes. Every system had rhythm, and rhythm created predictability. Predictability created vulnerability. His job was to identify every weakness before the cartel did. Lila Curtis became his partner in ways neither had anticipated. She brought institutional knowledge, understanding of corporate culture and personnel dynamics that Caleb could never access alone. He brought tactical thinking, the ability to see buildings not as workspaces but as battlegrounds with fatal angles and choke points. They worked late into evenings, the city glowing beyond tinted windows, coffee going cold in forgotten cups. She learned to read his silences, understanding when his stillness meant concentration and when it meant he had identified something critical. He learned her patterns too, the way she hummed quietly when stress mounted, how she kept emergency chocolate in her desk drawer, that she took her coffee black with exactly one sugar. "Walk me through a typical day," Caleb said one evening, studying personnel access logs, from when Ariana arrives to when she leaves. Lila pulled up her tablet. But before she could begin, Caleb stopped her. "Not from the schedule. From memory. Tell me what actually happens, not what is supposed to happen." She paused, understanding the distinction. Ariana arrives around 7. Earlier if board meetings require preparation. She uses the executive entrance on the east side. Security clears her through, but she stops to talk with the morning guards. She remembers their names, asks about their families. Caleb made notes. Consistent arrival time, predictable entry point, personal interaction that creates delay, all potential vulnerabilities. Continue. She takes the private elevator to 42. Always stops at the executive lounge first. Coffee. She has a specific preference, prepared by the morning staff. Then to her office. Lila glanced at Caleb. "You are thinking that coffee is an exposure point." "Everything is an exposure point," he replied. "Until we eliminate variables, nothing is safe." Who prepares the coffee? Rotation. 3 different staff members. Morning shift. Vetted. Background check standard for all food service personnel. But those were done 18 months ago. "Run them again," Caleb said. "Deep background. Financial records. Look for recent stress, debt, family problems, anything that makes them vulnerable to coercion." Lila made notes, her fingers moving quickly across the tablet. "What else?" Caleb studied the monitors. Her office has windows on 3 sides. Beautiful views. Also, 3 angles for potential sniper positions. The buildings across are commercial. That means rooftop access for maintenance, HVAC, window washing. Any of those could be exploited. "We cannot move her office," Lila said. "The board would notice. Questions would be asked. Then we harden it. Ballistic glass, electronic countermeasures, and she does not stand near windows anymore. Not until this ends." Over the following days, they implemented changes. Some obvious, some subtle. Security. Rotations became unpredictable. Access protocols tightened. Delivery schedules shifted randomly. The canary trap was deployed. Unique information seeded to each of the 12 suspects. Details about meetings and movements that existed only on paper, waiting to see which false lead the cartel acted upon. Caleb spent hours reviewing camera footage, watching for patterns that did not belong. A maintenance worker who lingered too long. A delivery driver who asked too many questions. Anything that suggested reconnaissance. Ariana cooperated but struggled with the restrictions. She was a woman who had built her empire on being present, on walking floors and knowing her employees. Hiding in secure spaces felt like surrendering. One evening, she confronted Caleb in the war room. "How long does this continue? I cannot run my company from a bunker until we eliminate the threat," he replied without looking up from the monitors. "That could be weeks, months, then it takes months." She moved closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I will not live as a prisoner in my own building. Better a prisoner than a corpse," he said bluntly. "The cartel does not take breaks. They do not respect your schedule. They will strike when you are vulnerable. And if we have not prepared, you will die. Is your pride worth that?" The harshness landed like a slap. Ariana's expression hardened. "You do not get to lecture me about risk. I built this company from nothing. I fought hostile takeovers and market crashes and investors who said a woman could not lead. I will not hide because criminals want me afraid." Caleb stood, and in that moment, the operator fully emerged. "I have carried bodies of people who thought courage meant exposure. I have written letters to families explaining why their loved ones died from preventable mistakes. You want to inspire your employees? Stay alive. Lead from safety. Until we end this. Then you can return to being visible." The tension held for a long moment. Then, Ariana exhaled, some of the fight leaving her. "You speak from experience." His jaw tightened. "I speak from bodies I could not save. Do not make me add yours to that list." Something shifted in her expression. Not surrender. Understanding. She nodded once and left. Lila had witnessed the exchange from the doorway. When Ariana was gone, she approached Caleb. "You care," she said softly, "more than you admit." "I care about finishing this," he replied, "so I can return to my daughter." "Is that all?" He looked at her then. Really looked. Saw the woman beneath the corporate assistant. The intelligence, the strength, the way she had stepped into this chaos without hesitation, because it was what needed to be done. Something in his chest tightened. "What do you want me to say, Lila?" She held his gaze. "I want you to acknowledge that you are not just protecting Ariana. You are protecting all of us, including me. And maybe that matters more than you want to admit." The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Caleb wanted to retreat into operational distance, wanted to maintain the walls that kept him safe. But looking at her, seeing the hope and fear in her eyes, he could not. "It matters," he said quietly. "You matter." Her breath caught. For a moment, they stood in the glow of monitors, surrounded by technology designed to detect threats, neither acknowledging the threat developing between them. Not danger. Something else. Something that made his carefully constructed defenses feel suddenly inadequate. The moment broke when an alert sounded. One of the monitors flashed red. Caleb was at the console instantly, pulling up the feed. Delivery van. East entrance. Driver presenting credentials that matched no scheduled delivery. Lila was beside him, already on the phone with security. "Hold that vehicle. No one exits until we verify." Through the camera, they watched guards approach the van. The driver seemed calm, cooperative. He presented paperwork, spoke into a radio. Everything appeared normal. But Caleb's instinct screamed warning. "Get Ariana to the safe room," he ordered. Now. Lila did not question. She made the call. On another monitor, they saw Ariana's office security detail mobilize, surrounding her, moving her toward the reinforced panic room 3 floors below. The van driver handed over documents. The guard reviewed them, reached for his radio. Then the world exploded. Not literally. The van was not a bomb, but the driver drew a concealed weapon with professional speed, firing twice before guards could react. One guard went down, the other returned fire. The driver dove back into the van, tires screaming, as it accelerated toward the exit barrier. Security sealed the building automatically. Steel barriers dropped. Blast doors engaged. The van crashed into the barrier and stopped. Trapped. Caleb was already moving. Lila grabbed his arm. "Where are you going?" "To end this," he said. "Before they breach. You do not have a weapon. You are not authorized for." He looked at her, and she saw the operator fully present now. All pretense of civilian life stripped away. "I do not need authorization. I need you to keep Ariana safe until I return." Then he was gone, moving through corridors with the purposeful stride of someone returning to familiar terrain. Lila watched him disappear and felt something between terror and awe. Because she realized, perhaps for the first time, exactly who Caleb Turner had been before he became a janitor, and what it meant that he was willing to be that person again. For them. For her. The building held its breath. Somewhere, trapped between barriers and guards, the cartel had made its move, and Caleb Turner, who had spent 3 years trying to be invisible, was about to remind the world why Delta Force operators were legends whispered in the dark corners where wars were truly fought. The preparation was over. The confrontation was beginning, and this time, there would be no walking away until it was finished. The parking structure was a concrete labyrinth, designed for corporate efficiency, not combat. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows between support columns. The van sat wedged against the security barrier, its front end crumpled, steam rising from a ruptured radiator. 3 men had already exited, weapons raised, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of military training repurposed for criminal enterprise. Caleb approached from the stairwell, moving through shadows with practiced silence. He wore no body armor, carried no weapon except the knowledge carved into muscle memory through years of training. His heart rate remained controlled, breathing measured. This was familiar terrain, not geographically but psychologically. The space between violence and survival. The place where decisions measured in microseconds determined who walked away. The first attacker never heard him. Caleb's hand struck the weapon arm, deflecting the barrel toward the ground as his other hand drove into the man's throat with calculated force. Not enough to kill, enough to collapse the windpipe temporarily, send the body into panic mode, deprive it of oxygen and coherent thought. The man dropped, hands clutching his neck, weapon clattering across concrete. The second attacker spun toward the sound, training overriding panic. His weapon tracked fast, but Caleb was faster. He closed the distance before the barrel aligned, swept the gun aside with his forearm, while his palm struck upward into the man's nose. Cartilage crunched, blood sprayed. The attacker staggered backward, vision blurring with involuntary tears. Caleb followed with an elbow to the temple. The man went down hard, unconscious before he hit the ground. Movement to his right. The third attacker had better positioning. Weapon already aimed. Finger tightening on the trigger. Caleb dropped low, rolling behind a concrete support column as shots echoed through the structure. Rounds sparked off stone, fragments stinging his face. He counted shots. Semi-automatic, 15-round magazine. The shooter was disciplined, firing controlled bursts rather than spraying wildly. Caleb's mind processed options at computer speed. Direct assault was suicide. The column provided cover, but no tactical advantage. He needed to disrupt the shooter's position, create confusion, exploit the moment of hesitation that even trained operators experienced when patterns broke. He grabbed the fallen weapon from the first attacker, checked the chamber, confirmed it was loaded. Then he threw it hard toward the van. The metal clattered loudly against concrete, drawing the shooter's attention for half a second. Half a second was enough. Caleb moved, not toward the shooter but parallel, using vehicles for cover, closing distance at an angle that kept him out of the direct line of fire. The shooter adjusted, tracking movement, but Caleb was already inside his decision loop. By the time the barrel swung toward him, Caleb had closed to arm's length. The fight was brutal and intimate. Caleb grabbed the weapon, twisting it away from his body while driving his knee into the shooter's midsection. Air exploded from lungs. The weapon discharged once more, the muzzle flash blinding in the confined space, the round punching through a car window in an explosion of safety glass. Caleb stripped the weapon free, tossed it beyond reach, then engaged hand to hand. The shooter was good. Former military maybe, or cartel special forces trained by defectors who knew American tactics. He blocked Caleb's strikes, countered with elbows and knees, fought with the desperate efficiency of someone who understood losing meant death or imprisonment. They crashed into a support column, traded blows that echoed through the structure, each looking for the opening that would end it. Caleb took a fist to the ribs that sent fire through his entire torso. Something cracked, not broken but damaged. He ignored the pain, channeled it into focus, waited for the shooter to overcommit. When the next punch came, Caleb slipped inside, locked his arm around the man's elbow, applied pressure to the joint until it hyperextended with a sickening pop. The shooter screamed. Caleb spun him around, applied a blood choke with precise pressure on the carotid arteries. 10 seconds. The body went limp. Caleb lowered him to the ground. Still breathing. Still alive. He had made promises to Sophie about who he was now. Those promises mattered more than efficiency. But the van still held occupants. Through the cracked windshield, he saw movement. 2 more, maybe 3. And they were not surrendering. They were regrouping. The driver emerged first, weapon raised, firing. Immediately, Caleb dove behind a concrete barrier as rounds stitched across the ground where he had been standing. His ribs screamed protest. Adrenaline was a finite resource, and he was spending it fast. He needed to end this before his body started refusing orders. Security forces were responding. He could hear boots on stairs, radios crackling with terse commands. But they were floors away, minutes that felt like hours. If the remaining attackers decided to force their way deeper into the building, civilians would die. Employees who came to work thinking about presentations and deadlines, not cartel violence. Caleb could not allow that. He moved again, using vehicles and columns for cover, circling toward the van from an unexpected angle. The driver tracked left, anticipating a frontal assault. Caleb came from the right, low and fast. He struck the weapon hand, sent the gun skittering away, then drove the driver face first into the van's exterior. The man crumpled. The 5th attacker, still inside the van, opened the side door and leveled a shotgun. At this range, cover meant nothing. Caleb saw his death in the black circle of the barrel, saw the finger tightening on the trigger, and knew his body could not move fast enough to matter. The shot never came. Preston Ford appeared from the stairwell, his wounded shoulder forgotten, his backup weapon raised in a perfect 2-handed grip. He fired 3 times. The shotgun wielder jerked backward, rounds hitting center mass, body armor absorbing the impact but stealing breath and balance. The shotgun discharged into the van's ceiling, deafening in the enclosed space. Preston fired twice more. The attacker collapsed. Caleb sagged against a vehicle, his ribs protesting every breath. Preston approached, weapon still raised, clearing angles with professional discipline. "You good?" Preston asked. Caleb nodded, unable to speak through the pain. Preston keyed his radio. "Structure secure. 5 suspect down. Need medical. And tactical teams, immediately." Within minutes, the parking structure flooded with security personnel and emergency responders. The attackers were secured, searched, identified. Paramedics tried to examine Caleb. He waved them away, focused on reaching the war room, on confirming Ariana and Lila were safe. He found them 3 floors up in the reinforced panic room. Ariana sat rigid in a chair, her composure a mask over barely controlled fear. Lila stood near the door, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. When Caleb entered, bloodied and battered, Lila's professional mask shattered. She crossed to him in 3 steps, her hands hovering over his injuries, wanting to touch but afraid of causing pain. "You are hurt," she whispered. "I am functional," he replied. which was operator code for alive enough to matter. Ariana stood, her CEO persona struggling to reassert itself. Did we get them all? Yes, Caleb said. But this was not the main assault. This was a probe, testing our response, times, our coordination. The real attack is still coming. The word settled like lead. Ariana's face went pale. How can you know? Because that is what I would do, Caleb said quietly. Send expendable assets first. Study the response. Identify weaknesses. Then commit your primary force when you understand the battlefield. Lila's voice shook slightly. How much time do we have? Days. Maybe less. They will analyze what happened here, adjust their approach, then strike again. And next time, they will not underestimate us. Preston arrived, his wounded shoulder finally receiving proper attention from a paramedic who had chased him through 3 floors. He is right, Preston said. This was reconnaissance in force. The cartel is playing a longer game than we anticipated. Ariana moved to the window, looking out over the city, where millions of lives continued oblivious to the violence that had just unfolded floors below. I will not let them turn my building into a war zone. I will not endanger my employees for my survival. Caleb limped forward, each step a reminder of the damage his body had absorbed. Then we end it. Now. Before they regroup. How? Ariana asked. We stop defending, Caleb said. We force them to come at us on ground we choose, with rules we set. We turn this from a siege into a trap. Lila understood first. You want to use Ariana as bait. Caleb met her eyes. I want to use all of us as bait. Leak information about a location. Somewhere controlled. Somewhere we can channel their approach and eliminate them permanently. That is insane, Lila breathed. It is operational necessity, Caleb countered. They will not stop. Every day we wait. They refine their intelligence, recruit more assets, plan better attacks. We end it now, or we die slowly. Ariana turned from the window, her expression hardening into the determination that had built empires. What do you need? Caleb looked at her, then at Lila, then at Preston. He saw fear, he saw exhaustion, but he also saw resolve. These were not soldiers, but they were warriors in their own right, and they trusted him to lead them through the fire. I need 48 hours, Caleb said. A location we can control completely, and the will to see this through to the end, whatever that means. You have it, Ariana said without hesitation. Lila nodded, her hand finding Caleb's for just a moment, a touch that communicated more than words could carry. Preston checked his weapon with his good hand, smiled grimly. About time we took the fight to them. Caleb allowed himself a tight smile. Then let us build them a battlefield they cannot survive. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm, but inside Vertex Technologies, in a war room surrounded by monitors and encrypted communications, the counter-offensive was beginning. The hunted were becoming hunters, and Caleb Turner, who had spent 3 years trying to be invisible, was about to remind the cartel why Delta Force operators were feared in the darkest corners of the world. The confrontation was not over. It was only beginning. And this time, it would end in absolute terms. Victory or death. No middle ground remained. The interrogations began immediately. 5 cartel enforcers, injured but alive, separated into secure rooms, where federal agents applied pressure with the methodical patience of professionals who understood that silence was temporary. Everyone talked eventually. It was only a question of technique and time. But before any of them spoke, the answer revealed itself through different means. Caleb sat in the war room 3 hours after the parking structure attack, his ribs taped, painkillers dulling the worst of the damage. He reviewed the canary trap results with the cold focus of someone analyzing enemy movement patterns. Each of the 12 suspects had been fed unique information. False meeting locations, fabricated schedules, invented security protocols. The idea was simple. Whichever false information the cartel acted upon would identify the source. The van attack had targeted the east entrance during a specific shift change. That detail had been fed to exactly one person. Caleb pulled up the personnel file, his jaw tightening as the photograph loaded. Grayson Foster, head of information technology, 12 years with Vertex Technologies, clearance to access every system in the building. Trusted, respected, compromised. Leela entered the war room carrying coffee she had forgotten to drink. Her eyes red from exhaustion and stress. She saw the file open on Caleb's screen and stopped. Grayson? No. He has been with us since the beginning. He helped build our security infrastructure, which makes him the perfect asset, Caleb said quietly. He knows every weakness because he helped create them. Access to schedules, camera feeds, personnel records. The cartel did not hack your systems. They recruited someone with the keys. Ariana appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension in Leela's voice. What are we looking at? Caleb turned the monitor so she could see. Your mole. The information that led to today's attack came from his terminal. The canary trap worked. Ariana stared at the photograph, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, bitter acceptance. Grayson attended my wedding. He sent flowers when my mother died. How long has he been selling us out? That is what we need to determine, Caleb said. But I would estimate months. Long enough to establish patterns. Long enough to make the cartel confident in their intelligence. Where is he now? Ariana's voice carried steel. His office. Lila said, checking her tablet. He came in this morning. Normal schedule. He has no idea we know. Caleb stood, ignoring his body's protests. Then we bring him in quietly. No alerts. No drama. We need to understand the full scope of his betrayal before the cartel realizes we have identified him. The arrest happened with surgical precision. Security approached Grayson Foster at his desk where he sat surrounded by multiple monitors, his fingers moving across keyboards with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. When Preston Ford appeared with 2 federal agents, Grayson's face went through a cascade of expressions: confusion, fear, then resignation. They brought him to a secure conference room. No windows, reinforced door. Recording equipment that captured every word and micro-expression. Caleb waited inside, sitting across the table with the stillness of a predator that had already won. Grayson attempted defiance first. I do not know what you think I have done, but you are making a mistake. I have worked here for 12 years. I have dedicated my career to this company. Caleb slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts, terminal access logs, the specific false information fed only to Grayson, the exact details the cartel had used to plan their attack. The evidence was mathematical, undeniable. Grayson's defiance crumbled. He stared at the documents, his hands beginning to shake. They have my son, he said finally, his voice breaking. My son. He is 23. He went to Cancun for spring break 2 years ago. Got involved with the wrong people. Drugs, debt. The cartel took him. They said if I did not cooperate, they would send him back in pieces. The confession spilled out in a torrent, how the cartel had first contacted him. The photographs they sent of his son, bound and terrified. The instructions that came encrypted, always small requests at first. A schedule here, an access code there. Nothing that seemed catastrophic until the pattern emerged. They promised they would release him if I helped them, Grayson said, tears streaming down his face. They promised. I know that was foolish. I know. But he is my son. What would you have done? Caleb thought of Sophie. Of the promises he had made to keep her safe. Of the lines he would cross if her life was truly threatened. But he also knew the mathematics of terrorism. Cooperation never bought freedom. It only proved vulnerability. Your son was dead before they contacted you, Caleb said with brutal honesty. They do not keep hostages. They can use for leverage. They eliminate witnesses. What you have been protecting is a memory. What you have been feeding them is innocent lives. Grayson collapsed forward, his face in his hands, his body shaking with sobs that carried the weight of realization and guilt. I killed them, he whispered. Everyone who died. Everyone they hurt. I killed them. Yes. Caleb agreed. You did. The federal agents took over the interrogation, extracting every detail. Communication methods, handler identities, the full scope of information Grayson had provided. It painted a comprehensive picture of cartel operations, their planning methodology, their targets, but it also confirmed Caleb's fear. The cartel knew Vertex Technologies' security infrastructure completely. They had mapped every vulnerability, identified every weakness. The parking structure attack was not the main assault. It was reconnaissance confirming their intelligence was accurate. The real attack was still coming. That evening, as federal agents processed Grayson Foster and began dismantling his compromised systems, Ariana made a decision. She called a press conference. Against every instinct of her legal team, against the advice of her board, she decided transparency was the only path forward. The press room at Vertex headquarters filled with reporters whose questions came rapid fire, whose cameras captured every micro-expression. Ariana stood at a podium, Lila to her side, and told the truth. 2 weeks ago, cartel operatives attempted to assassinate me at the Belmont Grand Hotel. I survived because of the intervention of a private citizen who wishes to remain anonymous. Since then, my company has been under siege. Today, we thwarted another attack, and we discovered that someone we trusted had been compromised, feeding information to the enemy. The room erupted with questions. Ariana raised her hand for silence. I stand here today to make several things clear. First, Vertex Technologies will not be intimidated. We will not negotiate with terrorists. Second, I owe my life to individuals who stepped forward when it would have been easier to look away. Third, we are working with federal authorities to ensure this threat is eliminated permanently. A reporter shouted, "Can you confirm the identity of the person who saved you?" Ariana's expression hardened. No, that individual has a family to protect, has a life they wish to live quietly. What I can confirm is that without their courage, I would not be standing here. Is it true the person is former military? I will not comment on their background. But I will say this. In a world where everything has a price, this person asked for nothing. No payment. No recognition. Only the right to return to their life. That kind of integrity is rare. I will not betray it by turning their sacrifice into spectacle. The press conference continued, but Caleb watched from the war room. His jaw tight. Ariana had protected his identity as promised, but the attention was building. Every major outlet would be investigating. Every journalist would be searching for the mysterious hero. His invisibility was evaporating with each broadcast. Lila found him after, her expression apologetic. She had to do it. The board demanded a statement. Shareholders needed reassurance. I understand, Caleb said, but understanding did not make it easier. She reached out, her hand finding his. When this is over, you can go back to your life, back to Sophie, back to being invisible. He looked at her, seeing the hope in her eyes, the unspoken question beneath. Could he go back, after this? After remembering who he used to be? After connecting with people who saw him not as a janitor, but as something more? When this is over, he said carefully, we will see what is possible. It was not a promise, but it was not a rejection either. And for now, in the space between violence past and violence coming, it was enough. Federal analysis of Grayson Foster's communications revealed the cartel's timeline. They were planning a final assault. Comprehensive. Overwhelming. Within 72 hours. The target was not just Ariana. It was Vertex headquarters itself. A statement attack designed to prove that even in America, even surrounded by security and law enforcement, the cartel could reach anyone. Caleb gathered the core team. Ariana, Lila, Preston, Federal Tactical Commander. They needed a plan that turned the cartel's confidence into their destruction. And as they mapped strategy, as they prepared for the coming storm, Caleb felt the operator fully emerge. Not the father trying to be invisible. Not the janitor content with anonymity, but the warrior who understood that some threats could only be answered with absolute force. The revelation had changed everything. The betrayal had been exposed. The enemy's plan was known. Now came the hardest part, surviving what came next, and ensuring that when the dust settled, the people he cared about walked away intact, even if he did not. The final assault came on a Wednesday night. The cartel committed everything: 20 operatives, military-grade weapons, a plan designed to overwhelm through sheer force. But Caleb had turned Vertex headquarters into a killing field. Every corridor a trap, every room a calculated disadvantage for attackers. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When federal tactical teams secured the building, 18 cartel operatives were in custody. 2 were dead from wounds sustained in crossfire. 0 civilian casualties. Caleb took a bullet to the shoulder, not life-threatening, but enough to require surgery and weeks of recovery. He woke in a private hospital room with Sophie asleep in a chair beside his bed, her small hand clutching his. Lila sat near the window, her eyes red from crying, her professional mask abandoned completely. When he stirred, Sophie's eyes opened immediately. "Daddy," she whispered, launching herself carefully onto the bed, mindful of his injuries. "You came back. You promised and you came back." He wrapped his good arm around her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "Always, Bug. Always." Lila approached, her hand trembling as it found his. "You scared us," she said quietly. "When we heard you were hit, I thought I know." He interrupted gently. "But I am here. We are all here." The recovery was slow. Physical therapy for his shoulder. Psychological sessions mandated by federal protocols for anyone involved in lethal incidents. Caleb tolerated both with patient resignation, focused on the only metric that mattered: getting home to Sophie. But home had begun to change in subtle ways. Lila visited often, bringing meals because Caleb could not cook one-handed, and Sophie's diet of cereal and sandwiches worried her. The visits stretched longer. Dinner became conversation. Conversation became laughter. Sophie declared Lila was her friend now, with the absolute authority only a 10-year-old could muster. One evening, 3 weeks after the hospital discharge, Lila helped Sophie with a science project about ecosystems. They sat at the small kitchen table, surrounded by construction paper and markers, their heads bent together as Sophie explained her vision with elaborate hand gestures. Caleb watched from the couch, his arm still in a sling, and felt something shift inside his chest. Emma had been gone 3 years. The grief had dulled from sharp agony to persistent ache. He had convinced himself that part of his life was finished, that loving again would betray her memory. But watching Lila laugh at Sophie's jokes, watching her patience as she guided without controlling, he understood something Emma would have wanted him to know. Love was not betrayal. Love was honoring the life Emma had wanted for them. The life she could not give them but would have blessed if she could. When Sophie finally went to bed, project completed and placed carefully on the counter to dry, Lila lingered. She stood at the window overlooking the street, watching traffic lights change in rhythmic patterns. "Thank you," Caleb said from the couch, "for everything. The meals, the help with Sophie, just being here." She turned, her expression vulnerable in ways her corporate mask never allowed. "I am not doing this out of obligation, Caleb. I am here because I want to be. Because when I am not here, I think about being here. Because Sophie makes me laugh in ways I forgot I could. Because you." She stopped, searching for words. He stood carefully, crossing to her, his good hand finding hers. "Because I what?" he asked softly. "Because you make me believe there are still good people in the world," she finished. "People who do the right thing even when it costs them. People who choose family over everything else. People who are exactly who they claim to be." He lifted her hand, pressed it gently to his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. "I am not perfect, Lila. I have done things in my past that would horrify you. I have made choices that haunt me. I do not need perfect," she said. "I need real. And you are the most real person I have ever met." They stood like that for a long moment, city lights painting them in soft colors, the apartment quiet except for Sophie's breathing from the next room. Then, slowly, carefully, Caleb leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, the kiss of someone who had forgotten how to be vulnerable and was learning again. When they separated, Lila smiled, her eyes shining. "I have wanted to do that since the playground." "I know," he admitted. "So have I." The relationship developed with careful deliberation. They were not teenagers rushing toward passion. They were adults with scars and responsibilities, building something meant to last. Lila spent more time at the apartment. She learned Caleb's coffee preference, the way he moved stiffly in mornings until his shoulder loosened, that he had nightmares he would not discuss but needed presence to ground him. He learned she hummed when concentrating, kept emergency chocolate in every bag, read romance novels late at night when corporate strategy books failed to quiet her mind. He learned she had grown up poor, that her success was built on determination and sacrifice, that beneath her competence lived a woman who desperately wanted family but had convinced herself career was enough. Sophie accelerated everything. With a youngster's clarity, she saw what adults tried to complicate. One morning over pancakes, she announced, "Lila should live here, then you could be together all the time." Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. "Bug, that is not how these things work." "Why not?" Sophie demanded. "You like her. She likes you. She likes me. We have a spare room. She could move her stuff in, and we could be a family." Lila, flustered and touched, looked at Caleb helplessly. He saw the hope in her eyes, the fear of rejection, the longing for exactly what Sophie had articulated. "That is a big decision," he said carefully. "People do not just move in together because it is convenient. But you love her, right?" Sophie pressed with devastating accuracy. "And she loves you. So why wait?" Out of the mouths of youngsters came truth adults spent years avoiding. Caleb met Lila's gaze across the table. "Do you want that?" he asked. "This life? This apartment? A ready-made family with complications and baggage?" Lila's voice shook slightly. "I have spent my entire adult life being careful, planning, making safe choices. And I am tired of safe. Caleb, I want real. I want this. I want you. Both of you." Sophie cheered. Caleb laughed, something that still felt rusty, but increasingly natural. "Then I guess we need to clear out the spare room." The integration happened gradually. Lila's belongings migrated in boxes and suitcases, her designer clothes hanging beside his worn jeans, her expensive skincare products crowding the bathroom counter, her books filling shelves that had held mostly Sophie's stories. They established routines. Lila handled weekday breakfasts because Caleb's shoulder still limited his range of motion. He managed dinners because cooking relaxed him. Sophie set the table and narrated her day with the endless detail of someone discovering the world remained fascinating. Weekends became sacred, Saturdays at the park, Sundays exploring the city, cheap pizza, and museums with free admission. They were not wealthy. Caleb's disability payments and Lila's modest salary, after she reduced her hours at Vertex, covered bills with little left over. But they had something money could not purchase. They had each other. Ariana watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. She had offered Caleb a permanent security position, significant salary, full benefits. He declined, but he agreed to consult occasionally, to review protocols and train personnel. It gave him purpose without consuming his life. She also kept her distance, understanding instinctively that Caleb needed space to build his new life without the weight of obligation. But she sent gifts for Sophie's birthday. She invited them to company events they politely declined, and she became, in her own way, part of their extended family. One evening, 6 months after the final Cartel assault, Ariana appeared at their apartment with an envelope. Inside was a college fund, fully funded, enough to send Sophie to any university in the country. "I cannot accept this," Caleb said immediately. Ariana's expression was firm. "You saved my life. Multiple times. This is not charity. This is investment in the future of someone I care about. Sophie deserves every opportunity. Let me provide this one." He wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. But looking at Lila, seeing her nod slightly, understanding this was not about him but about Sophie, he relented. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This means more than you know." Ariana smiled, something genuine and warm. "You gave me my life back, Caleb. Let me help give Sophie hers." After she left, Caleb held the envelope like it might disappear. Lila wrapped her arms around him from behind, her head resting against his good shoulder. "We are building something good here," she whispered. "Something that lasts." He turned, pulling her close, and for the first time in 3 years, felt the heavy mantle of grief and responsibility lighten, not disappear. Emma would always be part of him, her memory woven into every decision. But the crushing weight had transformed into something gentler. Gratitude for what they had shared. Permission to build something new. That night, after Sophie slept and the city hummed beyond their windows, Caleb and Lila sat on the fire escape like they had begun to do most evenings. The air was cool, autumn arriving with gentle insistence. "I never thought I would have this again," Caleb admitted. "Family. Someone who sees all of me, and stays anyway." Lila took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I never thought I would want it. I convinced myself career was enough. That being needed was the same as being loved. You taught me the difference." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other through violence but chosen each other through peace. Below, the city continued its endless rhythm. But here, in this small space carved from concrete and hope, they had built something the chaos could not touch. A family, not traditional, not perfect, but theirs. And that was enough. 2 years passed like water finding its level, steady and inevitable. The apartment in Brooklyn became home in ways that transcended square footage and peeling paint. Sophie grew tall and confident, her mother's stubbornness tempered by her father's quiet strength. She excelled at school, asked questions that made teachers pause, dreamed of becoming a doctor because she wanted to save people the way her daddy had. Lila transitioned fully from corporate warrior to family anchor. She still consulted for Vertex Technologies, her strategic mind too valuable to completely abandon, but her hours were her own. She attended Sophie's soccer games and parent-teacher conferences. She learned to braid hair through trial and error that left them all laughing. She became not a replacement for Emma, but something different and equally essential. Caleb found peace in teaching. The community center offered him a full-time position leading their youth program. He taught self-defense, not as a path to violence, but as confidence building. He showed teenagers how to walk away from fights while maintaining dignity, how to protect themselves and others without becoming what they feared. His students worshipped him with the intensity of young people finding mentors who understood struggle. They did not know his full background. They only knew he treated them with respect, pushed them toward excellence, and showed up every single day. The nightmares never completely stopped. Some nights Caleb still woke gasping, his shoulder aching phantom pain, his mind trapped in Kandahar or that hotel corridor. But Lila was there, her presence a lifeline back to now. And Sophie, older and more perceptive, would sometimes appear in their doorway, asking without words if he needed company. They would sit together until dawn, not speaking, just being, and that was enough. On a Saturday in late spring, almost 3 years after the Belmont Grand Hotel, Caleb made a decision. He took Lila and Sophie to Prospect Park, to a quiet spot near the lake where cherry blossoms painted everything in shades of pink and white. Sophie ran ahead, chasing ducks, with the unself-conscious joy of someone who had never learned to doubt the world's essential goodness. Caleb turned to Lila, taking both her hands. He had rehearsed this 100 times, planned the perfect words. But standing here, seeing her face lit by spring sunshine, all the preparation evaporated. "I spent 3 years trying to be invisible," he said simply, "trying to protect Sophie by hiding from the world. You taught me that hiding is not the same as living, that being seen by the right person is not danger but gift. I love you, Lila. I want to build a life with you, not someday, now." He dropped to one knee. Sophie stopped mid-chase, seeing what was happening, her hands flying to her mouth, The ring was simple. He could not afford extravagance, but Lila's eyes filled with tears as he opened the box. "Will you marry me? Will you officially become part of this chaotic, complicated, beautiful family we have built?" Lila's answer came through tears and laughter. "Yes. Absolutely yes." Sophie shrieked with joy, running back to tackle them both in a hug that sent them tumbling onto the grass. They lay there, the three of them, laughing under cherry blossoms while strangers smiled at the obvious love. The wedding happened 3 months later. Small by design, a botanical garden in Brooklyn, where light filtered through glass domes and painted everything gold. Sophie served as maid of honor and flower girl, her dress the exact shade of purple she had demanded. Mrs. Vaughn from downstairs cried openly. Preston Ford attended in dress uniform, his shoulder healed, his respect for Caleb evident in every gesture. Ariana Steele sat in the front row, beside her new head of security, a woman named Cassidy Rhodes, who had proven herself capable and trustworthy. Ariana had restructured her entire company culture after the Cartel attacks, prioritizing people over profit in ways that shocked her board but earned fierce loyalty from employees. When it came time for vows, Caleb's voice was steady. "I thought my story ended when Emma died. I thought the best I could hope for was survival, keeping Sophie safe and nothing more. You showed me that stories can have second chapters. That love does not diminish when shared. That family is not defined by blood but by choice. I choose you, Lila, today and every day after." Lila's voice shook, but her words cut clear. "I spent years making myself necessary instead of making myself happy. I convinced myself that being indispensable at work was enough. You taught me what it means to be wanted, not for what I can do but for who I am. You gave me a family when I had forgotten I needed one. I choose you, Caleb. I choose Sophie. I choose this beautiful, complicated, perfect life we are building together." When the officiant pronounced them married, Sophie cheered loud enough to echo through the garden. The reception was modest. Cheap champagne and homemade food. A playlist instead of a band. Dancing on grass that left shoe prints and laughter. Caleb danced with Sophie first, lifting her despite his shoulder's protest, spinning until she giggled breathlessly. Then, with Lila, holding her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest, understanding that this moment, this ordinary, extraordinary moment, was what he had fought for without knowing. Life continued in its relentless forward motion. Sophie turned 13, then 15, growing into a young woman who carried her mother's memory and her father's strength with equal grace. She volunteered at hospitals, shadowing doctors, asking questions that revealed a mind sharp enough to change the world. Lila's consulting work evolved into a leadership training program she built from scratch, teaching young professionals that success did not require sacrificing humanity. Her first book, published when Sophie was 16, became a business bestseller. Not because it promised wealth, but because it promised something more valuable: the courage to define success on your own terms. Caleb's community center program expanded to 3 locations. Foundations funded it, corporations sponsored it, but he never lost sight of why it existed: to give young people the tools to protect themselves and the wisdom to know when protection meant walking away. On Sophie's 18th birthday, they gathered at the same botanical garden where Caleb and Lila had married. Sophie was heading to college, full scholarship to Columbia, pre-med track. The future stretched before her, bright with possibility. As sunset painted the glass domes in shades of amber and rose, Sophie stood between her father and stepmother, looking at the city beyond. "I think Mom would be proud," she said quietly. "Of all of us." Caleb's throat tightened. "She would be, Bug. She absolutely would be." Sophie turned to face them. "You taught me something important. Both of you. That strength is not about fighting. It is about choosing who you fight for. It is about protecting what matters even when the cost is high. I want to be that kind of strong." Lila pulled her into a hug. "You already are. Sweetheart. You already are." Ariana arrived then, impeccably dressed as always, but her smile was genuine and warm. She had remained part of their lives, the unlikely godmother who sent extravagant birthday gifts and offered advice when requested. She approached Caleb, extending her hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving my life, for teaching me that wealth means nothing without people to share it with, for being exactly who you are." Caleb shook her hand. "Thank you for respecting our privacy, for understanding what mattered most." She smiled. "I learned from the best." As evening deepened and stars emerged between city lights, the gathering slowly dispersed. Preston and his wife said their goodbyes. Mrs. Vaughn collected leftover cake. Ariana departed in her usual efficient manner. Finally, it was just the three of them, Caleb, Lila, and Sophie. The family built from loss and choice and stubborn refusal to let darkness win. They sat on a bench overlooking the garden, watching lights flicker on in patterns that suggested order beneath chaos. Sophie leaned against Caleb's shoulder. Lila held his hand. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt completely at peace. His story had begun in violence, in classified missions and battlefields where survival measured success. Then tragedy had reshaped everything, forced him to become someone new. For years he had believed invisibility was victory, that protecting Sophie meant hiding from the world. But he understood now that he had been wrong. Victory was not invisibility. Victory was this: a daughter confident enough to chase dreams, a wife who had chosen him despite easier paths, a life built not on hiding but on standing firm and building something worth protecting. He thought of Emma, as he often did in quiet moments, wondered if she could see them, wondered if she approved. And in the gentle evening breeze, in the way Sophie laughed at something Lila said, in the peace settling over his battle-scarred heart, he felt her answer. Yes. Build your life, love your family, be happy. That was enough. The city hummed its eternal song beyond the garden walls. Millions of lives intersecting and separating. Millions of stories the world would never fully know. Caleb Turner's story was one among many. Not special, not extraordinary, just real. A man who had been a soldier, a father, a janitor, a protector, a husband. All of it true, all of it him. And as they sat together, his family complete and present, he understood the most important truth of all. Survival was not the victory. Love was. Being seen by people who mattered was not danger. It was gift. And home was not a place you defended. It was people you chose and who chose you back. That was the story. Not of heroism, but of healing. Not of battles won, but of life rebuilt. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.